So Karen is back with another fun time with theory. Theory 10 today, doing sequencing. So in grade 9, we learned that we could have a descending fifth sequence. And at that time I said, just be aware that there is a lot more to sequencing than just the descending fifths. We're just trying to get you used to the whole idea, and then we're going to expand on it. Now, of course, there's going to be many different sequences that you will find in your music that aren't explained by just the few that we bring up. We're just giving you the most common usages. So attached below is a pair of sheets that have to do with sequencing, and I'm just going to invite you to stop the video and print that out, and then have a pencil ready, maybe an eraser, but I think we can guide you through learning the different sequencing. Okay, so I'm going to assume you just arrived back and that you are ready to go. So we're going to start off with the familiar descending fifth sequence, and we're in the key of D major, and you can see that I have put this in 4-part harmony. So up here in the instructions it says to complete the following in 4 voices, continuing the texture. So sometimes it's in 4-part harmony, and sometimes it's in keyboard style, and we need to continue on with that and get used to actually having some of these things in keyboard style. For a lot of people, it's not that it's harder, it's just that it's not familiar. So we learned last grade that when you went from your 1 chord to your 4 chord, mark your octave and your fifth so you know where those are. If you get parallel octaves in the first bar of a sequence, they will go through the whole thing, and we don't want that. So when we put in our 4 chord, we go, what is the common tone? Looks like the D. So it would be the D in the soprano. If you put a D on line 3 in the tenor, that is not a common tone, because the first D in the first bar is a bass note, and in the second bar, in the second chord, it is the tenor note. Thus, it's not common because it isn't sung by the same person. So we've got a G and a D, so we say B. Is B closer to A or to F sharp? And it's closer to A, so we're going to put a B into the tenor, and that means our doubled note G will be in the alto, and then we check where our fifths and octaves are. The octave here is between the bass and the soprano, and here's between the bass and the alto, not parallel. Here the only fifth is bass to tenor, and the fifth here is bass to soprano and alto to soprano. We are very good. We have no parallels, and in part that's because we just kept the common tone and made everybody move as smooth as possible. Only the bass is the one that's leaping around. Now when we make our 7 triad, he's on the downbeat of bar 2. He should have the same intervals as the downbeat of bar 1. So that means if our 1 chord had a fifth, we will start with the fifth on our 7 chord. So G is going to be our tenor note. And then I look to the 1 chord, the doubled note is in the soprano, so I'm going to come over here and put a C sharp up in the soprano, and that means the E is in the alto. When we put in our octave and fifth, it will match exactly where it was in the first. So our downbeat has a fifth here and then an octave on the outside. Our downbeat of the next bar, a fifth here and an octave on the outside. So now we have a situation where if you don't have parallels in the first 3 chords of a sequence, you can just keep going without putting in all of your brackets, because it will, as long as you keep the sequence, you'll be fine. So our 3 chord should look like our 4 chord, and that means G to B is a 10, so that means we should have F up to A. Our doubled note was in the alto, so that means we want an F. It's an F sharp actually in the alto, and then that leaves our C sharp as the common tone in the soprano, and indeed when we put in our brackets they match the 4. So this one matches this guy, and this one matches this guy, and that's how this whole thing gets set up. Now we can see what our pattern is. 5, 10, 5, 10. So we can continue on just going 5 for the first, the downbeat, and 10 for count 3. 5, and then 10. So I just put in the rest of my notes just following the pattern. You could also follow the pattern across instead of up and down, where it went down a skip, up a step, down a step, skip, up a step, down a skip, up a step. And then we pop on our stems. We notice that the soprano started going D, D, C, C, so we are going to continue that sequence. B, B, A, A. And when we look at the alto, it was step up, skip down. Step up, so we're going to skip down to D. Step up to E, skip down to C, step up to D. And in there, we now have the entire circle. We started on a 1 and we ended on a 1. We went through with our fifths, and we have diminished triad on the 7. So because we're in the sequence, remember, we can have a diminished triad in root position with a doubled leading tone because it's more important to keep the sequence than it is to avoid that sound. When we actually put this into sequences like what Mozart did, we do you actually don't hear the diminished in the same way. So it works out quite nicely. The Mozart I was talking about is that's a descending fifth sequence that key of C major, and it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So when you go to do the F sharp minor, it is the same premise, but notice that I have put inversions into this. We still have the idea of the sequence to maintain. It just happens to have an inversion in it. Now you have to watch that you don't end up with parallels because of that. But let's start with our F sharp minor. We've got a fifth from the bass to the tenor and our octave in the outer voice. Now when we go to BDF for our 4 chord, our F sharp is still the common tone. Notice that I've changed it to 3-4 times, so we are now filling in quarter notes. Now where can we put the B? Well, we can put a B in the tenor right next to the C sharp. And we can put a B in the alto right next to the A. In a 4 chord, it's a primary chord, so we want to have a doubled root if it's all possible. And as a matter of fact, this makes it so there's just no parallels at all in how we've set this up. So if you need to pause the video at any point to match what I've got in front of you, you just go right ahead to do that because that's what this is for. So then when we go to the next bar, we see that it's a capital 7. That capital 7 is the subtonic chord. We do not raise the leading tone. But just like the previous one, we have to make it match the downbeat of the first bar. So we've got a fifth. Our octave is in the outer part. And we want a G as our last note in the alto. We do our double check. Do we have any parallels? And we do not. So this is a 6 here, this is a 6 here, this is a fifth here, this is a fifth here. So now this guy needs to influence this one. This is a 6 and this is a 5, so we're going to make that happen. C sharp is going to go up to the A. We have the octave in the center and then the fifth. So if you keep remembering your octave is in the center of this one, it makes this one much faster to actually draw. And now you are set to continue on. We are still not raising our leading tone in that 3. It's a capital 3. It's supposed to sound like A major. So continue on putting in your notes. D, great. So our sixth chord would be going D, A, F, D. Our 2 chord would be going B, G sharp, and D. And then we come to our 5 chord and say, finally, we are in a minor key, and because we've reached a half cadence, we do raise our leading tone. So in here, we are not going to put the E sharp up in the soprano because that would cause an augmented second up there. We want to avoid those. So let's put our E sharp in the alto, just under that G sharp. And then we have a G sharp we can put in the tenor, and our doubled note of C will go in the soprano. We do a double check and we go, no, it actually fits, and it continues the sequence. So we have a sequence that went all the way from here to our authentic, where it really does go 6 5 6 5 6 5 6, and this is 5 6 5 6 5 6 5. Your intervals might not match if you build up your chords slightly differently at the beginning, but again, their sound. And then often it would go to a tierce to Picardy at this point. So those are just straight descending fifth sequences that are no different than your grade 9. Then we look down and we see that in G minor, we have the same descending fifth sequence, but every one of these notes has a 7th on it. Okay, so let's really take a moment to learn from this. So G, B flat, D, F is a minor triad plus a minor 7th. So this would be a G minor 7 in root quality symbols. Just going to take a moment to make sure that we're doing these all logically. We also notice that we are in keyboard style, so it's 3 notes in the right hand and 1 note in the left hand. So our next chord is C, E, G, B. We have a common tone, so we put the B in. And then we say in G, B, D, F, our 7th is F, so it has to fall a second. So now this is how far we have it. And then we go, oh dear, when I put in my 5th, it's going to mess it up. It's either going to be way too high here, or I'm going to have parallels going on. This is where you say to yourself, I need to alternate between complete and incomplete chords. So we're going to leave out the 5th, and we're going to put in a C. And this is a small 4/7, so this is a capital C, little m 7. Now, when we go to our 7/7, again, it's a subtonic 7th, no raised leading tones. It's not in there. It should match the intervals that we have on the downbeat of bar 1. So in G, B, D, F, if we put the A will be 1 lower than the B in the first chord, the C will be on space 3, and the E for F-A-C-E will be on line 1. So literally all I did was I took each note in the 1/7 and said, well, going to 7/7, every note will be down 1. This is a capital 7, and when we actually look at this, this is F-A-C-E flat. F-A-C-E flat is a major triad plus a minor 7, so that is an F7. We have to stop and think about these things carefully. But that was our complete chord. So now when we go to count 3 of 4/4 time, it'll go back to being incomplete so that we can capture our sequencing. So the octave was on the outside, so we're going to put the B flat up at the top. Our 3rd was the lowest note, and then we need to throw in our 7th. And this one is B flat D F A, major triad plus a major 7. Therefore, this one is called a B flat major 7. So you can see we've got a pattern going. I happen to have drawn this slightly differently, but it's still the same pattern. Every seventh must fall a second. If your sevenths don't fall, you need to start again. Usually the reason that the seventh doesn't fall is that we've forgotten to go complete incomplete. Our first one is G minor 7 because it's a minor triad with a minor 7. C minor triad is C minor triad with C to B flat. F7 is F major triad with F to E flat, a minor 7. B flat major 7 has a major triad plus a major 7th. That's how I come up with my root quality symbols. And now we just need to keep the pattern. The top voice went D, C, C, so I'm going to go B, B, A, and then to G. The next one down went B, B, A, so that would mean G, G, F, F. And the lowest note of the right hand went F, E, E, D, D, C, C, B. And then I just come to the final one and I go, oh, the 5 chord is a triad, D, F, A, so that breaks our sequence in bar 4. And our 1 chord doesn't have a 7th either, so we keep our common tone and we're good to go. Now we got lucky that all of our stems are going up. A lot of times people forget that they have to watch their stems. So this is what that one ended up to be. It is a descending fifth sequence, the same as we did in grade 9, but there are 7ths. The important element is complete incomplete, or the reverse. So the sound here in there, we need to put a raised leading tone at the 5. And you could actually go up as well. Or your leading tone can either rise to the tonic or fall to the dominant in the middle of voice. So F sharp minor without 7ths. G minor with 7ths. It sounds richer with it. The one below, literally, you keep the sequence that I've already set up. And I'm showing that there are times that you can have a sequence that is set up that uses different inversions. So just as in line 2, F sharp minor, we went 1, 4, 6. That's what's happening here. But in 6/8 time on count 3 and count 6, I'm adding the 7th. Okay, so when we resolve that guy, we need to say E, G, B, D, my 7th must fall a second. So that means C is the highest note in my first inversion. And we need an A. And then we're going to use another A. And then when we go to our 4, 6, 5, we've got the C of A, C, E, G. So our C and our A will stay the same, but then the bottom A goes down to a G. Now, at this point, it is not this one doesn't match this, and this one doesn't match that. It's the bar. So this downbeat will match here, this will match here, this will match here. So your inversions give us the cue to what your sequence is, but it's a full bar instead of just a couple of chords. So it is possible to actually have the 7ths and still be going back and forth between. Yes, isn't that interesting? And it can be a lot of fun to just sit at the piano and do those. For now, I'm going to encourage you to stop the video and see if you can figure out the rest of that one on your own, and then restart it, because we are not done. We have also got other sequences at the grade 10 level that we need to do. And so I was showing you how you take your grade 9 descending fifth sequence into a grade 10. We also have the 5-6 sequence. It can be descending or ascending, and I'm not finished yet. Another time I'm going to actually come on with another sequence again. With the 5-6, you can clearly see by the numeration that I've got there that it is going root position, first inversion, root position, first inversion, root position, first inversion. That's what it does. So when you're just going down a scale, to avoid parallels, go between the root and the first inversion. So when we go from 1 to a 5 in first inversion, we go, okay, our common tone is C. We need a G. Let's put G in the alto. And then what a lot of people do here is they end up not thinking about the fact that if this is 5 in first inversion, we should have 2 Cs. We definitely do not want 2 Es, because you're at the beginning of a sequence. You can avoid that doubling of the leading tone, and we would want you to do that. Now, if you're 3 or 4 chords into it and it just happens, let the doubled leading tone go. But where you can control it, control it. So now when we go to 6 in the next bar, it should have the same intervals as the downbeat of the first bar. So F to A is a third, so that means D to A is a third. F to F, so the doubled note was in the alto. And then we have the fifth, the A, in the soprano. Now at this point, we are wanting to look at this and say, wow, the tenor is going down a fifth, and the alto is going down a fourth. Is there anything that I can do to change that? And what a lot of people erroneously do is they fix the 6th chord to keep common tones. But you can't do that if you're in a sequence. You would actually come back to the 5 in first inversion and say, well, if I put the C in the alto, it rises to the D. If I put the G in the tenor, I've got A, G, F. And then I can double my C still, and my soprano only goes down a third. So I rerouted this once I saw how it fit between 2 of these, because these must match. Don't change this one if it doesn't fit very nicely. Change this one and make it fit between. So now we know that the 3 in first inversion has to have a third, which is an E, and then the root of the chord, the A, is in both the soprano and the alto. So I know you're saying to yourself, Karen still left a leap of a fourth. And it's going to keep on happening. Yes, there will have to be in here one of the voices leaping by a fourth, but there does not need to be 2. That's what we were trying to avoid. And now we can see that the tenor to the bass to the tenor literally goes down in thirds. And we can fill in the other notes by observing the patterns. That the soprano went C, C, A, A, so this would be F, F. Our alto went down a fourth, up a second, down a fourth, so up a second to B, and then down a fourth to F. And we already said that the tenor is just going to keep on going down. Now when we go to our 2 in first inversion, we have to say to ourselves, I can't have parallels. So if I put an F in the soprano and a D in the alto, I think that I should change the soprano from an F to a G. No, I'm going to put the G in the alto, and then I'm going to double the D, because that makes it so all the voices move smoothly and there's no parallels. And then when I go to my 5/7, I say, wow, my sopranos are superiorly low. But if we have C, E, G, B, the G is actually a common tone with the chord before. So we're going to put it in and say, I've got a complete dominant 7, so I'm going to make an N complete 1 chord. And in here, my B, my 7th, has to fall a second. To the A, and then we have 3 Fs. So quite interestingly, I started in a normal range, and because this is a descending pattern, I ended up quite low. Sopranos would not be pleased at this point. So the sound of this one, sorry, sort of thing. If we want to do it, I tend to sometimes play what is my hands and not what I'm really looking at. So in there, we have a descending 5/6 pattern. So if you were doing it in a minor key, you would again notice that you're not raising your leading tone until the cadence at the end. Now, just at the end of this video, because I was aiming for half an hour on sequencing, I'm going to also include ascending 5/6 sequence, and you're going to look at the bass and go, oh, it's not just upside down of the descending. No, it's not. When we descend, the scale just goes C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, or from whatever tonic that you're on. Now, when we go up, we're going to double it. It's going to go C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F, G, G. And frequently, by the time we get to the dominant, we sort of go, this is enough of a sequence because we've got so many chords happening already. So you will notice that if you are not particularly careful, this one you can get literally a Guinness Book World Record of amount of parallels going on. So don't double the F in your first inversion because you had to double the F for your root position chord. Because if you do that, you'll have parallel octaves all the way up. So I doubled my A in my DFA because it worked smoothly. It's got a common tone and it's a skip up from the F. Could I have doubled the D? Yep, you could have doubled the D. But I think that you would find that the bottom part of this would have had a jagged look to it. And what we're trying to do is as small leaps as possible. So that means that our 2 will look like our 1 and just be a root position triad for the right hand. Our 7/6 is the subtonic. So the root was the highest note in our 6/6, so that means our E is up top. And then we're going to have 2 Bs because we're going to keep the same pattern as we had. So now, literally, you can say to yourself, well, all my root position chords will actually just look like root position chords. And my main thing is to watch my stems. So I just threw in, well, hang on, where am I? I just threw in those chords because I knew they would all be root position. And then I come and say, okay, my top note is going to go up 1. And then a 4th below that, I'm going to have 2 notes because that's my doubled note. So now we have filled it in just by observing the pattern in the notation. You certainly can stop and figure out the letters for every one of these chords. If you do that, you still need to look at the pattern to have it work out to be correct. And that is the primary challenge here, is that sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to go to that many ledger lines, and you forget you're in the middle of something. And then we notice that Karen threw in a dominant 13th. Can we get to it? We've got a C in the bass. We want our 7th, which is our B. We're going to pop that on line 3. We need our E And we're going to now make sure that we have in this chord the 5 with the E natural in both this, of the 5 and the 5/13. And the 13th always turns out to be a third above the tonic, which is the mediant, the A. So it turns out the G rises to that A beautifully, and we drop a third to the tonic. Now, I admit that I stacked this particular sequence to work for the dominant 13th. In general, when you're looking at a series of chords, if you notice that there's a dominant 13th or dominant 9th, draw it in first so that you know how high you're supposed to be going in general. Always having a goal chord can really help us to stay logical through a period of like 10 or 12 chords. Now, our ascending 5th sequence is this. And voila. The one challenge that we just had, did you pick it out? When we went from 2 diminished 6 to the 5, we ended up with an augmented interval. Because we were still in the sequence when we drew the 5 to match the 4, the 3, the 2, and the 1, we get to leave it. Your sequence is the star at the top of the Christmas tree. When you find little things like double leading tones, we leave it alone because the sequence wins. Now, up there, what makes this stars twinkle is that when we have 7ths involved, every 7th must resolve. We can't say it's a sequence so it doesn't matter. No, it's up there making the stars twinkle. So the 7th and the sequence are equal in importance. And then, ironically, the leading tone sometimes just doesn't end up being part of the equation in a sequence. And the main reason here is that it's not acting as a leading tone. When we put a leading tone in a cadence, we are doing it so that we have the pull to the tonic and we have a sense of punctuation. We are not wanting to create punctuation into the middle of a sequence. We are wanting it to flow on, and thus the leading tone doesn't need to act like one. And that's it for today. My sequencing for grade 10 level. There is still a couple more to go, but for now that's enough. Thank you very much.